on Flashpoints, we speak to Flashpoint Special Correspondent Randy Credico, who was called to give testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee investigating Russiagate. Credico says it's a witch hunt he won't comply. Also, is the right-wing government in Honduras in the middle of another election steal? We'll have an extended report from the ground there. I'm Dennis Bernstein. All this straight ahead on Flashpoints. Stay tuned. In Berkeley, I'm Dennis Bernstein. You're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. Well, we turn our attention to the House Committee investigation led by Adam Schiff on the so-called Russia infiltration, undermining of U.S. elections. Many of us have a lot of doubts about what's going on there. One of us has now been called to testify about his work as a journalist. I'm talking about Randy Credico. He is a special correspondent for Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio, and he is the host of Live on the Fly in New York City. He is a longtime activist. He's run for mayor on the Green Party, ran a very powerful candidacy, had a lot to do with undermining and slowing down. I know it hasn't stopped. They say it has. Stop and frisk in New York City. He has a lot of courage. On his show, Live on the Fly, and I had a chance to participate with him, he did a 10-part series on Julian Assange, and apparently, although we don't know yet for sure because the committee isn't saying, this permanent select committee on intelligence, but apparently it's that connection. Randy Credico, welcome back to Flashpoints. I'm looking at a letter dated November 9th, 2017. It says, Dear Mr. Credico, as part of its bipartisan investigation into Russian active measures directed at the 2016 U.S. election, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence requires that you participate in a voluntary transcribed interview at the committee offices. What is this letter about, and what's your response?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. This is really the first interview I've done on it, although Max Blumenthal will have a story sometime today. Well, what is it about? I really don't know. Obviously, they've cast a wide net to keep this thing that's been running on fumes about Russia hacking of the DNC and the Podesta emails and supposedly passing them on to Assange, whatever, I have no idea specifically what they want for me. As you said, I did like a 14-part series on Julian Assange, and it all started in 2016, August 25th. I had him on my show, Live on the Fly in New York City. And then this last year, I started a show. It began with John Pilger and him. And then I've had nobody else but people like yourself and those who are experts on national intelligence, such as national security, such as Ray McGovern and William Binney and Thomas Drake and Jocelyn Radock and many others.
Those are folks with heavy credentials, former
John Kiriakou.
Yeah,
people have been indicted.
Who worked for the NSA and these agencies, insiders. That's who
the
you
CIA.
had on your show. Yes.
Yes, and then I had Julian Assange's mother on, and you were part of that interview, and we interviewed a lot of people. You were on with the interview with Julian Assange.
You think this is about your work and your series with Julian Assange? You don't think... Where does Roger Stone come into this picture?
Well, I've known Roger Stone for a long period of time. I mean, he is considered an unsavory character. I actually worked with him in 2002 with this independent campaign in New York, and it was really about fighting the Rockefeller drug laws.
He's an intellectual. Describe him,
Well, he's a trickster. Look, I have He is a source on my radio show. I used him last year to the dismay of some of the people at the station, but I also had Gary Johnson on, Jill Stein, supporters of Hillary Clinton. Look, I like to have controversy at the station I was working at because it needed a shot in the arm. And Stone was always a good guest to have on, and he was always provided some very interesting detail. So I have no idea if that is, they've gone after him. I mean, he has testified. So I really don't know the contents. I know what the underlying reason is, and that is to undermine Julian Assange. That's what it's all about. I have visited him. It's obvious that I visited him. I was there doing something for you last week, and I spent 2 different days with him. I'd been there earlier this year and had lunch with him. But it's all confidential stuff, and it's related to the story I was working on, which is Stefania Morizzi and her attempts to get access to files that the Crown Prosecutor Services, which represent the government of Britain, and their communications with the Swedish prosecutor. A very significant story, and you put it out there, and it got a lot of play. And so I think, they want to contain him.
Like a hostile intelligence
they've called him an enemy, not an enemy, but a hostile intelligence entity. That's what he's labeled as right now, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. So, maybe it revolves around that. I don't know, but certainly the stuff that I was doing was pretty heavy, was pretty profound, and we're talking about a journalist here who's never printed anything that has been contradicted.
All right, you're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. That's the voice of Randy Credico. He is a contributor to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. He started the program Live on the Fly in New York City as a part of that series, an incredibly listened-to series. He did he says 14-part series on Julian Assange. Randy, I want to read a little bit more from this letter November 9th, 2017, from the U.S. House of Representatives Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. It says, we respectfully ask that you produce to the committee by no later than the close of business day on November 24th, I guess that's passed, your availability for the interview during the time identified above. You're not going, are you?
I sent my lawyer sent the letter last Monday to them. Monday last week, saying that I have declined to voluntarily testify. So he got a phone call the very next day. First of all, he got an email acknowledging the receipt of my response. And then he told me that they said to him, the counsel for the committee, that I will be subpoenaed. So that's the next step, is just the processing, the procedure of a subpoena getting to him and then to me to compel me to testify.
And have you thought down that road? If a subpoena comes, will you acknowledge it? Will you respond to it?
Well, I don't know. I just saw the movie The Hollywood 10 with Dalton Trumbo. And, it would be very difficult to give credence or credibility to this. So what really is an overreaching, broad-based witch hunt. And I don't know what the motivation is. I mean, take a look at Adam Schiff himself. 60% of his contributions come from defense contractors. So do they want to continue a war? They want to keep the Cold War going with Russia? I don't know. And will I appear? Do I have First Amendment rights? I have been a journalist. I was a comedian and an activist for most of my life. I ran the William Kunstler Fund for 15 years. And for the last year and a half, I have been working, actually longer, for you. I started being a special correspondent for you during the stop and frisk period. And so I've continued with a radio station in New York City for the last year and a half as a journalist, because I am delving into current affairs and global issues, and this whole Russiagate thing I've been covering myself, and now I'm dragged into it.
All right, and let me read on with this letter from Schiff
Please,
and the folks.
I need the anxiety. Please, read on.
Forgive me. This letter also requests preservation and production of all documents, records, electronically stored information, recordings, data, and tangible things, including but not limited to graphs, charts, photographs, images, and other documents, regardless of form other than those widely available, e.g. newspaper articles, related to the committee's investigation, your interview, and any ancillary matters.
Yeah.
So reflect on that kind of ask.
Look,
ask.
Let's be honest. I am a Luddite. I'm about as technologically savvy as Alley Oop. Okay, I really don't know any of the stuff that they're talking about there, but it certainly seems like a form letter, and like they're trying to get Alger Hiss or something. I don't know.
He's back in the news.
Yes. There's some pumpkin papers I've been carrying around.
All right.
It's hard to maintain a sense of humor, but you got to with all of this. You got to try to maintain, because I do have anxiety. No matter what I do, going in front of the Klieg lights is not something. I'm in the show business. I like performing, but not sure this is the arena I specialize in.
How's your Adam Schiff? Is Adam in the room?
I'm working on it. I'm working on his voice and that guy Gowdy, Trey Gowdy. So you have, and then you have the woman from up there, Jackie Spires, on the same committee. But they just want to keep. Look, I don't like Trump any more than anybody else. Trump is a monster, all right. But and there are ways that they can get him legally. But to use this Russiagate thing is really a false premise, and it's dangerous because you're throwing it. Like I said, the net is too wide, and they're spending a lot of money, a lot of time. In the meantime, people are being deported to Haiti. People are being deported to El Salvador and Nicaragua and every place else. We're not taking care of business in Puerto Rico. There's massive unemployment. When you look beyond the real numbers, the phony numbers that they have, and we are, on the brink of nuclear war. There's a lot of things happening right now, and this new tax bill that's about to destroy the middle class and poor people. Got 2.5 million people in prison. These are the issues they should be talking about in Congress, but they're not. They're spending all their time, and no one's interested. If you took a poll and asked people the top 10 things on their list, Russiagate wouldn't even register.
I was speaking with Randy Credico, and we say Russiagate because Randy has now received a request to come testify before the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence investigating the Russiagate stuff. Let's just say that. And he is expecting now, according to the committee who's contacted his legal counsel, to be subpoenaed before this committee. So
let me just say this, yes. Dennis. What I got to throw this in before I forget, is that they have yet to request an interview with Julian Assange. Now, if he's in the center of all this, why don't they go over there and interview him? They don't want to interview him because they are not going to get anything that's satisfactory to them, no matter what he says to them. It's the same thing where you exposed last week, where the Crown prosecutor kept Assange in there by telling the Swedish prosecutor not to interview him. All right, they didn't want him to be interviewed by the Swedish prosecutor because their hand would have been forced. And the same thing here, their hand would be forced if they were to go over there and interview him or give him immunity and send him over here. We don't know if he's under indictment or anything. All I know is he's contained in that for 5.5 years. This journalist has been buried away. And as far as I'm concerned, this is Zola trying to help out Dreyfus, all right, because he is being persecuted for no reason at all, other than the fact that he's a truth teller and they're trying to snuff out the truth.
Zola and Dreyfus, for those who don't know?
Yes, Zola was a great writer, did Germinal and a whole bunch of others, and Dreyfus was a man that was wrongly convicted based on anti-Semitism in the 1880s. And it was somebody else who was given secrets to the Germans, and they blamed it on Dreyfus, and Zola stuck with it and finally exonerated the guy before his death.
You're listening to Flashpoints. We're speaking with a very live, the program he does live on the fly. Randy Credico has run for mayor. He's been a very...
Governor, mayor, and Senate.
Is it proper to say he's been a very serious player in the game of satire and public entertainment? Had a flourishing career, was on Johnny Carson, managed to offend everybody, but continues to do the work of, calling people's attention to key issues in various ways, whether it's through satire or in his latest incarnation as a journalist. We really did depend on Randy to report on what was going on through the more violent years at the hands of the New York City police and right-wing politicians. And Randy put his body on the line, was arrested many times, stood up and had an impact. Randy, you really made the current mayor of New York swear, and these are people who still pay very close attention to you, that he would get involved and slow down or stop and frisk. So I
debated him 4 or 5 times, and then we sat. I was actually running as a Democrat. I didn't get the Green Party nomination. Somebody else did. I was running as a Democrat in the primary. I lost. I did pretty well, though, without spending any money, and I got into a lot of the debates.
You got the information in. You got the information.
I got the information about not just about stop and frisk, but also about the horrible criminal justice system that exists. So this is the Deep South. New York City, if you go into any one of the bailiwicks here, courthouses, you will see that 95% of the people being the chow, as it were, are black and Latino on minor offenses, still like these infractions like jaywalking or open container. It's really quite remarkable that we always focus on what goes on in Alabama and Mississippi, but the same thing goes on here. These judges are not progressive judges here, and how they get in is they're political hacks. They get in there, and it's 95% white, and the prosecutors are 95% white and mostly male. And so that is one of the things I focused on during the campaign for mayor. And same thing with when I ran for governor, was to focus on things like the prison up there, Attica, Sing Sing, and all these other dungeons that should be closed. As Dostoevsky said, you can judge a society by the quality of their prisons or the prison conditions, and I can tell you the society is in very bad shape here in New York because there's no oversight. Rikers, the same thing. But to try to get in the public sphere, the stuff I had to run, it was performance art, and Bill Kunstler, I learned a lot from him where you can be impactful. And so
Bill Kunstler, one of the most important, significant, courageous, and successful people's criminal attorneys that existed in the 20th century, you would say.
Well, you know what? I remember the last time he did a Pacifica show, and it was your show back in 1995. When we were up there, I toured with him on his book tour, and it led him to San Francisco. I remember it was Border Books. Was it Border Books? I don't know. But he did your show at 5 o'clock back then, and
I got a big hug. I got a very big. I went to shake his. I went to shake his hand. And I got a huge hug. Randy, I have 2 more questions I want to ask you, I want to get to, because I know there's a lot going on for you today, that this story is coming out. It's an incredibly important story. But 2 questions. One is about Assange, and one is about the significance of this. So why did you devote so much time to Julian Assange? Why did you feel that was a story that needed to get out, which you did get out?
Well, you know why? Because it'd be the same thing if they were trying to snuff your voice out. This man is a journalist. He's an important journalist. A lot of journalists in corporate media have abandoned him, even though they've done the same thing. Even though what he's been charged with, you've got a lot of material that they got from Guccifer, too. You remember all of these, the Daily Beast and the Smoking Gun and these other online publications, they got material from Guccifer, too. He never did. and they put that stuff out there, and yet nobody's calling them a hostile intelligence organization. It's only him. He's being selected out. The guy is Mr. Clean. This is a very significant case. He has suffered so much. His family has suffered. He hasn't been able to see his kids. He hasn't seen the sunlight, but yet he has been there. And he continues to publish in spite of the fact, and I've been in that place 3 times inside an embassy, and I can tell you it's so small, and there's not a lot of air that gets in there. And so there's no sunlight, and he is doing God's work. He is a journalist that we should all be supporting, and when history looks back, those who were with him were on God's side. Those who weren't were on the evil side.
And finally, Randy, what is the significance of this kind of congressional committee witch hunt op? What are the implications? What's your version of the implications of this kind of call for all your documents, all whatever it might be that they're looking for, everything you ever thought that had anything to do with what they think has something to do with Russia undermining, whatever they're saying. Talk about that, Randy.
This is a replay of the 50s, replays of the Palmer raids in 1918, 1919. Same thing is going on right now with this. This is a very significant moment. People have got to either be on the right side or the wrong side. The fact that they can do this, they did it in the 50s. It scared people. This could possibly get me blacklisted just being associated with it. It's a very dangerous, and it's being done primarily by Democrats. White Democrats are the ones, and they want to know why their party is in tatters. We're talking about Democrats, Adam Schiff and Jackie Speier, this guy Slewell or whatever from California. California Democrats are the preponderant force behind this investigation.
These are the liberals leading the charge, trying to convince us that we're supposed to pay attention to agencies like the CIA, who have been lying to us for about 9 decades, or right, I don't know how long.
14 intelligence agencies, or 17 they keep talking about. And they let all these intelligence agencies...
Yeah, but they didn't. It wasn't even. It was 3, and it was selected. It was a select... It wasn't 14 or 17. It was a couple, and it was selected people from those 3 or 4 agencies. It's a total sham. They keep repeating that lie about these 17 agencies.
Here's what bothers me, Dennis. Here's what bothers me. Is the fact that you have intelligent community representatives like Clapper and the guy who's the head of the CIA, I can't even think of his name, Pompeo. They get to testify publicly and brew it false information, and it's not challenged. The people like me, they want us to do it privately. It used to be the other way around when those guys were doing things privately and the witnesses were doing things publicly. I don't know. It's flipped upside down.
Yeah, I think of Pompeo as sort of pumped up Peo or a blowfish. He's a serial liar. He's the consummate Washington politician. He doesn't do anything other than to further his career, and he wouldn't know the truth if it slapped him in the face while he was waiting for his limousine. Randy, I really appreciate the work that you've done for so many years. Work that has gotten you beatings, that's gotten you arrested, work that really continues to make a difference in the world of truth-telling. We talk about the work we do. We are the canaries in the coal mine of corporate disinformation. And you took on this subject of Julian Assange, incredibly important because journalists, the sick part of this in terms of the U.S. corporate journalism crew is that they want to be part of the prosecution of Julian Assange. They don't understand, documents. You remember the Pentagon Papers, boys? Everybody, you fought with the Washington Post about who was going to publish the truth about the Vietnam War. Now, again, these folks have become lackeys, prosecutors, stenographers.
Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow right at the forefront of propagandists for the power structure.
Any final words, Randy? What are you gonna? So you're gonna. We're gonna see this a piece coming out, or it may be out by the time we do this with Max Blumenthal.
Yeah.
And you're gonna do some local media on this.
Yes, I'll be on New York One News today, inside City Hall with Errol Louis, who's a good guy. I really like him. And then I will be doing what else? Jimmy Dore's show. That will be on YouTube. Later today as well. So it's a busy day for me. And you know what? Look, I haven't had butterflies like this in my stomach since I did the Tonight Show the night before, where I couldn't sleep the night before I did the Tonight Show, because it was exciting and it was nerve-wracking. I'm going on the Tonight Show, Johnny Carson here. I'm facing a committee, so I do have a constant feeling of anxiety in my stomach.
How'd that go on the Tonight Show? How'd you do?
I was good for the first 10 minutes. I was actually, that famous joke that I did talking about Jane Kirkpatrick. I brought it out of nowhere. I said, you look at Jane Kirkpatrick.
This is the former right-wing U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, appointed by Reagan. Go on.
I said, you look at Jane Kirkpatrick, you got to ask yourself seriously, did Eva Braun die in that bunker in 1945?
And Johnny didn't like that.
I never got asked back.
He didn't. Johnny went marching home again. He didn't stand up and clap.
It did not give me the chair. And if it was, it would have been electric. No.
All right, Randy. Well,
thank you, Dennis. Keep up the great work, Dennis.
All right. Well, and keep us posted on the next story. All right.
I will.
All right. Take it easy. Be careful.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. That was Randy Credico. And obviously, we're going to be watching this story very closely, a story that's going to be watching us as well. Stay tuned.